Throughout all of human history, wars, earthquakes, and empires rising and falling have shaped our world. But nothing, absolutely nothing, has killed more people than microscopic organisms we couldn't even see. These are the pandemics that didn't just kill millions, they toppled empires, rewrote economies, and permanently changed how humanity lives. Let's go through all of them. The Plague of Athens. It's 430 BC, and Athens is already in the middle of a brutal war. Thousands of refugees have crammed themselves inside the city walls, desperate for safety. Instead, they found something far worse. A mysterious disease tore through the overcrowded city with terrifying speed. Historians still argue about what it actually was. Typhoid fever, smallpox, even an early form of Ebola have all been suggested. What we do know is that it killed roughly a quarter of Athens' entire population, including its greatest leader, Pericles. The city never truly recovered. One disease may have decided the fate of ancient Greece. The Antonine Plague. In 165 AD, Roman soldiers came home from war in the East, and they brought something back with them that no sword could stop. A disease, almost certainly smallpox, began spreading through the most powerful empire the world had ever seen. For 15 years, it refused to stop. At its peak, 2,000 Romans were dying every single day. The army crumbled. Trade collapsed. The empire that had once conquered the known world was being quietly destroyed from the inside by something invisible. The Plague of Justinian. Just when the Byzantine Empire was at the height of its power, 541 AD brought catastrophe. Bubonic plague, caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, arrived through trade routes and exploded across Constantinople. At its worst, the city was losing 10,000 people every single day. Bodies piled up faster than they could be buried. Some historians estimate that up to 50 million people died across the empire. The plague of Justinian didn't just kill people, it killed an era. The Byzantine Empire never fully recovered, and the ripple effects reshaped Europe and the Middle East for centuries. The Black Death. 1347. This is the one most people know, and for good reason. It is arguably the single deadliest event in human history relative to population. Fleas on rats carried bubonic plague from Asia into Europe, and what followed was almost beyond imagination. Within just a few years, somewhere between one-third and one-half of Europe's entire population was dead. Entire villages vanished. Mass graves stretched across the countryside. People believed it was the end of the world, and honestly, it must have felt like it. But here's the strange part. The Black Death accidentally made life better for the survivors. With so many workers dead, labor became scarce and suddenly valuable. Peasants could demand better pay. Feudal systems began cracking. One of history's greatest horrors quietly planted the seeds of social revolution. Smallpox. Most pandemics are single outbreaks. Smallpox was different. It was a recurring nightmare that haunted humanity for literally thousands of years. The virus caused agonizing blisters across the entire body and killed at an extraordinarily high rate. It devastated civilizations on every continent, but perhaps its most catastrophic chapter came when European explorers carried it to the Americas. Indigenous populations had zero immunity. Entire civilizations that had survived for thousands of years were wiped out in decades. Smallpox is estimated to have killed 300 to 500 million people throughout history, more than every war ever fought combined. And yet, in 1980, humanity achieved something it had never done before or since. We completely eradicated it, the only disease ever fully defeated by human science: cholera. In the early 1800s, a new kind of killer emerged, one that hid in something people drank every day. Cholera spreads through contaminated water and kills through severe dehydration, sometimes within hours of the first symptoms. 7 separate cholera pandemics swept across the world between 1817 and 1923. Cities were completely unprepared because nobody yet understood that water could carry disease. But cholera's legacy is surprisingly constructive. The desperate need to stop it forced governments to completely rethink how cities were built. Modern sewage systems, clean water infrastructure, and public health departments all exist largely because of cholera. A disease that killed millions ultimately made cities safer for billions. The Third Plague Pandemic. By the mid-1800s, bubonic plague was back again. It began in China and this time had something new to help it spread: steamships. Global trade was booming and disease traveled with the cargo. Millions died, with India and China suffering the worst of it. But this pandemic had a silver lining buried in the tragedy. For the first time in history, scientists managed to identify the actual bacterium causing plague and trace exactly how it spread through fleas and rats. Humanity finally understood its ancient enemy. It wouldn't bring back the dead, but it meant future outbreaks could be fought properly. The Spanish flu, 1918. The First World War is finally ending. Millions have survived the trenches, the gas attacks, the unimaginable brutality. And then something worse arrives. An influenza strain unlike any before it begins spreading globally. Despite being called the Spanish flu, it almost certainly didn't start in Spain. Spain just happened to be one of the few countries whose press reported it openly. This flu was peculiar and terrifying in a specific way. It killed young, healthy adults most efficiently, the exact opposite of normal flu strains. Within 2 years, it infected roughly 500 million people, one-third of the entire world's population, and killed at least 50 million, possibly 100 million. More people died from this flu than died in the entire First World War. The world had survived 4 years of industrial warfare only to be devastated by something microscopic, HIV/AIDS. In the early 1980s, doctors in the United States began seeing something deeply puzzling. Young, otherwise healthy people were dying from infections that a normal immune system would easily fight off. Whatever was attacking them wasn't killing them directly. It was destroying their ability to defend themselves against everything else. The disease became known as AIDS, caused by HIV. Unlike every other pandemic on this list, HIV didn't arrive in a sudden, terrifying wave. It spread quietly, slowly, and was surrounded by fear and stigma that made it even harder to fight. It has claimed over 40 million lives and continues today. The story of HIV is also eventually one of scientific triumph. Antiretroviral drugs transformed it from a death sentence into a manageable condition for millions. But the pandemic isn't over, not even close. COVID-19. Most people alive today remember exactly where they were when the world stopped. At the end of 2019, a new coronavirus was detected in Wuhan, China. By early 2020, it was everywhere. Lockdowns, empty streets, hospitals overwhelmed. International travel essentially ceased to exist overnight. Billions of people stayed home. The global economy shuddered. COVID-19 became the defining event of the early 21st century, accelerating remote work, reshaping technology, exposing weaknesses in global health systems, and killing millions before vaccines could be developed at record-breaking speed. It was a reminder, uncomfortable and undeniable, that for all our satellites and smartphones and skyscrapers, a microscopic piece of genetic material can still bring the entire human world to its knees.